welcome to Crank It Up. I'm Jim Price, and for today's video, I want to talk about the Sonus Rule. I often talk about this rule informally, as if you all know what it is, but that changes today. The purpose of today's video is to give you some insight into the playtesting process through the lens of a rule like this, which is a design principle of what to avoid. This video will not only give you a perspective on things that I've actually looked for in the past, but this video also applies to creating your own custom factions as well. What this video won't do is help you earn money. To do that, check out today's other video for a chance to win some free money. To talk about the Sonus Rule, we brought in the actual Sonus, who has brief thoughts on the matter that I'll expand on later.
Hey everyone, Sonus here. Just want to talk about a minion design issue that I have. Doesn't happen much, but Bandit officially calls it the Sonus Rule, and I hope to never see it again. Basically, it's when the 2-power minion and the 4-power minion have about the same ability, but one of them is a little better. Maybe it's a talent or just stronger slightly. Think of, say, the dwarves with the gem grabber and loot lover, or the grannies with granny and grandma. It really annoys me how you're in a situation where one isn't good, you draw into the other one, well, it's also not good. Or you play one, and its ability requires so many of the same resources, but because it's stronger, it makes it as if the other minion basically has no ability at all. This happens especially a lot with dwarves and grannies, and it just eclipses any potential good there is when it's that one situation where you do want both of them, because it's just such a bad feeling to feel like a minion has no ability only because there's a copy of something slightly better in the same faction.
When he says it doesn't happen much, it is because once we became aware of it, Sonus, myself, and others would work to make sure it doesn't happen again. Interestingly, over the years, I myself have expanded the rule to include 3s and 5s, which also happens, and in its current form, the Sonus Rule for me covers general minion diversity. My take expands the rule from 2 to 4 to say that no minion in the same faction should explicitly outclass the other, even though 2s and 4s are the most blatant. We see this with 3s and 5s, 4s and 5s, 2s and 5s, seemingly everywhere. I believe Munchkin is the biggest offender because it's not just the factions that have this problem, but the monsters. The most recent example would be Marvel, where Green Goblin gets a better timing and better reduction than Electro. Nick Fury just blows away Coulson. So now that you know more about the rule, let's talk about 5 reasons why violating this rule is bad in my opinion. The first reason is probably the easiest to understand. It's simply unnecessary to do so. Most factions have 4 minion designs. That's right, 4. It's not like they have 9, which requires considerable effort to ensure diversity among every unit. From a sheer design perspective, a design space should be capable of producing 4 unique implementations. If not, that should be a sign that the design is stretched really thin and missing something. In a game with no shortage of fun, relevant abilities, the idea of doubling down on a specific ability seems unjustifiable. Granted, factions often have issues with actionizing their minions, but I would argue that simply swapping on some occasions would be better, because at least the minions would feel diverse, which is what we want. The second reason is something Sonus alluded to: resource contention. As he said, this is famously the dwarf problem, but it could also be a wizard problem with Chronomage and Archmage. There are times when doubling an ability can be good, but that's not true of dwarves and often not true of wizards. If you don't have any treasures in your hand, your gem grabbers are dead, which isn't fun. But it also means your loot lovers are dead as well. If you have no playable actions, Chronomage enters the same problem. It's too good an ability to waste, but there's no reason to use it now, and if you have no other minions to play, the choice becomes difficult. With wizards, there is enough of a difference between Neophyte and Enchantress to like them both. But when you consider the wizard card draw already being high, Chronomage forcing you into your lower ranked minions can be a problem, as you are drawing cards you don't need. In a strange way, this is also a kitty cat problem. Queen Fluffy has the talent version of Muffin, which is just insane, but it also means a lot of wasted or delayed muffins. In this case, opposing minions are the resource, and there may not be enough to go around. I actually find this happening with kitty cats often, when I've successfully slowed them down each turn with Queen Fluffy, but when it comes time to burst, there is no one left to steal, and I am incapable of bursting myself, so I become susceptible to 0 to breakpoint strategies. The third reason is that bad becomes worse. If the ability itself is problematic in the faction context, then doubling its frequency is even more problematic. This is the classic granny problem. Not only do the grandmas interfere with each other, but the grannies do too. If you have your granny out, you really have no reason to play the grandma, and a bad ability becomes a dead ability. This is also true of the thieves. Why bother trying to set up pickpocket plays when the master thief can provide a return on investment faster? Consider the general scenario. If you don't want to do X, then having more ways to do X really limits your options. Ninjas have this problem. If the game tempo needs you to play faster rather than slowing someone down, the fact that Tiger Assassin gives you weaker destruction than the Ninja Master is underwhelming. Also, when it's restricted purely to the minions, it limits your flexibility of play, since all of your minion plays would be doing the same thing, as opposed to having an option as a minion or an action. The warriors, honestly, can go either way, because of the big hero's ability to destroy the monster played by the taunter. But the big hero has the rare feat of outclassing the taunter from a playing monster standpoint, but also outclassing Berserker from a destruction standpoint, because the power counter really doesn't matter. If you are in a situation where playing monsters isn't good, the taunters are dead. If you don't have a reason to destroy monsters, the Berserkers are likely dead. The only one who doesn't lose out is the big hero, which leads into the fourth problem: it internally imbalances the faction. This is a common misconception among players, that balance is an external comparison only. That's only half the story. A faction's internal balance matters tremendously as well, which can determine whether the results are consistent or swingy. This is important because if a few key cards reach that level of power, then exploiting them can make a faction extremely strong in perfect synergies. A great example of this is the Mythic Greeks, where Odysseus completely eclipses the Spartan. Odysseus is an uncapped Spartan who can give anyone the counter, making the Greeks extremely top-heavy. But there's also a considerable drop-off between Odysseus and Heracles, where Heracles is a pale imitation, one who is still strong though. In this case, the opposite of the bad becomes worse problem occurs. Every action triggers twice and promotes spamming, but it highlights the fact that drawing a more common minion is really a letdown. Why does this matter? Well, for Smash Up, depending on card draw, games can often be decided by who draws what. That the random shuffle determines the outcome before the game begins, or at least puts a player at one relative advantage or another. While this outcome can occur even with diverse abilities, it's especially blatant when abilities are objectively better. The thieves live and die with their ability to have Master Thief, and the pickpockets are underwhelming and they absolutely rely on treasures. The kitty cats need their higher level minions to actually have their engine going. When a game is determined by who gets their 4s and 5s, it diminishes the question of how much of a game there actually is, and it leads into the final issue: when you repeat abilities, a faction doesn't feel deep, it feels scripted. I am only doing X because I have no other choice, and my choices aren't as meaningful because they are essentially the same. There are times where scripting is the point, like with Innsmouth, but consider the dwarves. Essentially, I have no choice. Draw treasures, put them on the loot lever, hope for Potion of Halitosis. It's the game plan every single time because there's nothing else I can do. And worse, because the dwarf minions don't draw treasures from the treasure deck, if you don't draw your dwarf actions, that scripting is reduced to doing nothing. In the event that other minions don't work, doubling the ability scripts even further. I've mentioned with ninjas that it feels like I am playing Shinobi and blank cards, because Tiger Assassin doesn't always work for me. Scripting is also bad because it can lead a player down a bad path. We can debate whether or not a faction has a responsibility to make its strategy apparent, but going back to ninjas, playing ninjas as heavy destruction is wrong. It slows the game down for no reason and doesn't help you actually accomplish your goal of breaking bases. But the game can force your hand in that direction because you have no other choice with their minion abilities. What allows a faction to overcome the scripting is nuance, to make the decisions matter. Like Big Hero, Shire Marshal outclasses both Quarterling and Bardling, who are also both outclassed by Pestling. But, as far as decisions go, knowing how to pace Halflings is still interesting, because you are intentionally playing from behind. So the Sonus Rule is not a death sentence, but the Halflings do have the same resource contention issue as Wizards. Not enough minions to play, making some abilities potentially dead. I could give additional reasons about why the Sonus Rule should not be violated, but simply, I wanted to circle back to my original point. It's just unnecessary. From a WoW factor, Before a game is played and a faction played for the first time, what seems more exciting, having 4 abilities or 3? While this problem can occur even with more minion designs like the Mega Troopers, it's still something that should actively be avoided. While not every violation is going to be a 2-to-4 split, looking more closely at related offenders, you begin to realize how widespread this can become. Hopefully the problem corrects itself in the long term, and this becomes a historical afterthought that you never realized until we pointed it out. I will say, it is good to see custom factions avoiding this trend now, because customs tend to abandon the slot system anyway, but progress is progress. It wasn't always the case with the factions I had historically seen. Do you consider this design principle to be important? Some value the consistency. Let me know either way in the comments. And if you do believe in the principle, who's your biggest offender? Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe. Let's shut it down.